I was in a canteen having lunch with some team leaders of my client. I had a very funny conversation with a Gen Z guy. You know that insecure overachiever one. I had my bácskai rizses hús, and I was complaining about the lack of salt. He said that's why our generation used sea salt. But all salt is sea salt. It's always been sea salt. Why does your generation need two words to describe salt? Do you say it's cloud raining? Or, oh, we got water wet? Then he showed a Tibetan sea salt on his phone. Look, this is 250 million years old. Yeah, but the back of the label says it's best before by October. What are we talking about? We kept on talking about different skills of generations, like they don't know how to address an envelope. They don't know how to read handwriting or how to read paper maps. Maybe, but we will take over the business world, he said. Maybe, but it's going to be pretty easy to get it back. All we need to do is to write our business plans on a piece of paper in handwriting and mail it to each other in an envelope. That was quite funny. So we had many conversations today about how diversity increases profit, innovation, or business results. So DEI is clearly on the agenda for HR many years now. How many of you have found it hard to push the idea through the managers? Just raise your hands. How hard do you think it is? Yeah, it is. If you're still coming to events like this, go to workshops, dinosaurs of trainings, it is suspicious that it requires quite a decent effort. But why is this, if the concept is so common sense? What is it that managers don't understand? They don't understand what we don't do either. We tend to argue how much men and women are different. But in fact, a definitive meta-analysis of several hundreds of studies have found that in 22% of cases, men and women differed. Men can throw an object further and faster than women can. Men tend to masturbate more frequently, or at least they are more inclined to report it. And men tend to have a more positive view on casual sex. But unless you work in a very unusual industry, probably your organizational leadership position does not require a manager to be especially good at throwing things, having casual sex, or self-pleasure. While stereotypical gender differences, like women are more sensitive and caring, whereas men are more physically aggressive or more competitive, are largely consistent with the research. There are more psychological similarities than differences between men and women. And this point is important, because even when statistical difference implies that groups are not equal, that still leaves plenty of place for similarities. For example, men are generally taller than women, but most women in the world are taller than, or many women in the world are taller than most men. The same cognitive bias hits us when we explain that younger generations can't read paper maps. The solutions we're putting in practice at the workplaces are making our aspirations on diversity even worse. Introducing formal quotas for women into a system which requires them to act and behave more like incompetent men will not correct people's unfair stereotypes of female leaders. We tend to misinterpret the results of the research literature. It is not the gender or the generational diversity that drives business results, but there is an underlying factor. It's skill diversity. Now let's see how many of you use competency models at your company? Most of you do. When I was a manager at multinationals, one of the most convincing corporate stories was that I have to make the best use of our human resources and identify precisely who to invest in and how, namely who we call talented or high potential. HR instructed me to introduce this competency modeling, the practice of competency modeling, which has become increasingly popular in the past decades. The idea is to identify excellent performance in a job in terms of the right grouping of a wide variety of knowledge, skills, behaviors, responsibilities, and or competences or behaviors. And competences became the language used to describe employee performance and potential, and they are expected to create clear linkages to organizational effectiveness. Competences are the lens through which the company sees its people, understands them, and values them. I had to rate my team members based on predefined competences, and my peers did the same exercise. We experienced that our definition of a competency was very diverse. We had a different understanding of customer focus or proactivity, for example. We may say that our interpretation of an abstract quality was very diverse. Trust me, I'm an engineer. It is hard to capture the existing range in the real world by identifying a particular skill that varies from person to person. It is impossible to prove or disprove that everyone who possesses who excels in a particular job possesses a particular set of competences. It is also impossible to show that people who acquire the competences they lack outperform those who did not. We've been wondering with our colleagues that why does it work in a way that a self-made consultant in the United States farts an idea into a double O flour and we all around the world bake it? Why don't we do it that way? Because if you think about it, assessing competences does not push us towards the direction to diversity. It just does the opposite. It pushes employees towards a non-existing imaginary idol and forces them to be similar to it, make them uniform. It is quite understandable why we can't make a substantial progress. It is like that we advocate with full throttle, but have not released the handbrake. And the result is big dust, which blocks clear view. We may consider some options that may help us achieve better outcomes. Firstly, it is not the diversity that we have to resolve, but leadership efficiency. A more reasonable goal would be to select better leaders, as this step would take care of gender imbalance. Putting more women into leadership roles does not necessarily improve the quality of leadership, whereas putting more talented leaders into leadership roles will increase the representation of women. We may argue that standards are unfairly high for female leaders. But I would reverse the argument. Standards for male leaders are not high enough. We should not lower our standards when we select women, but we should raise them when we select men. Secondly, if we really want to transform our workplaces into a diverse one, we should not push employees towards fictional, well-rounded competences, but help them identify their talents, encourage them to build on them, understand how they contribute to performance and what paths are possible next. Rating competences makes people feel like they've been dealt with. but addressing their talents and uniqueness, make them feel understood. And thirdly, when we create a single story and we show people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, that is what we become. Our brain is overly vulnerable to a single story. Providing just a single option is convincing others about our truth. Stories sell, but data tells. We should not make a fuss around the quality differences we feel is important. It is more efficient to build on the similarities. Instead of building our stories on unreliable data, we can give another story. Let's not discriminate against gender, as it is simply not fair. Let's not discriminate against ethnics, as it is simply not fair. Let's not discriminate against age, as it is simply not fair. And let's not discriminate against me, just because I don't know how much poppy seed is needed for bácskai rizses hús.